This day is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states. Hello and welcome to This Day, a history show from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avergan. This day, July 8th, 1850. First off, I want to say listener Tim Galloway sent this story our way, and it is a real doozy, as they say. Let me see if I can't set this up and talk about what Tim has gotten us into. It all centers around a man named James Strang. He is from upstate New York, and in 1843, James Strang moves to the Great Lakes region and takes up with a relatively new group of religious followers of Joseph Smith, author of the Book of Mormon. Strang joined the Latter-day Saints, became quite active in the church in that region, and then when Joseph Smith dies just a year later, Strang sees his opportunity. Over the next few years, Strang would mount a case that he was the true inheritor of the Mormon church, and he would come to challenge Brigham Young for that title. When Brigham Young seemed poised to win and took many of his followers out west, Strang stuck around in Michigan with a small but mighty splinter group of followers. And within a couple years, they established a theocratic colony on a remote island where he ruled with an iron fist and mounted raids on the local population and developed a reputation as a gruesome pirate king while also becoming a Michigan elected legislator. You know, that classic old American tale. But seriously, this is quite a ride. I really want to dive in right now into the story of the king of Beaver Island here, as always, Nicole Hammer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
No, many a frat boy has declared himself king of Beaver Island.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my God.
My God.
Start there.
Yeah, had that one in the chamber for a while. Unfortunately, I don't know if we can add this to our animals, to our collection of animal stories, because there aren't actually any beavers in this, you know?
Mm-hmm. No, it's disappointing.
Yeah.
It is. But it is Beaver Island. NIki, you have Michigan connections. Do you know this this part of the world?
I have Michigan connections in that I grew up in Indiana, and Michigan is the hat of Indiana. No, I don't. You know, my dad used to travel up to Mackinac, Fairmount for work, like Traverse City area, which is semi near this. But it seems as soon as I found out it was a vacation destination, I immediately hopped online. It seems like it's very rustic, and that there are a lot of pricey cabins and hotels there that do not accept dogs. So there will be no summer trip there for me.
I did the same thing. Why was I looking up? Because I was born in Detroit. But when I was like, Beaver Island, then I immediately started going down a rabbit hole. Like,
it is a nice little destination area right now. And there is something interesting about the kind of like weird lore of vacation spots. I guess, you know, this is a classic American tale in many ways, but that one certainly is just like these small little towns that, man, stuff went down. But let's get to know James Strang a little bit before we talk about how he basically proclaimed himself a religious leader and built a nice little following on that island. He's from upstate New York, as I said, born in 1813. Kind of itinerant, I would say, in his early years.
He seems to be one of those guys who bounces around and tries a lot of different things. He was a lawyer, he was a postmaster, a newspaper editor, a Baptist minister. He put on a lot of hats in the first 30 years or so of his life. And it's so interesting because of the way that people seem to describe him is he was really talented, he was really charismatic, and he kind of failed at everything. Yeah. And they don't quite explain why that was.
Yeah.
He's like, he was not an imposing man. The New York Times described him as, this is actually kind of mean. I would probably get revenge to the New York Times for this.
I know.
Rather below the ordinary size and very plainly dressed. In fact, I may as easily describe him by saying he is a diminutive, ill-favored, insignificant-looking man.
Oof.
Ouch.
Listen, if anybody described me like that.
But if the Times is writing about you as a cult leader, it means something, right? So there you go.
And they say he possesses considerable talent.
Yeah.
Again.
How you follow an insignificant looking man? I have no idea.
Oh, that's a really good question. But I don't know. I mean, are most religious leaders really good looking too? I don't know. There's charisma.
You got to have riz. You got to have something.
Manifests itself in many different ways.
That's right.
We should have like a little bell that goes ding when it's like classic American tale, because, we have itinerant person growing up in a small town, restless. And then I think another classic moment, falls into serious debt and has to make a serious break in his life. And I mean, that just feels like also the story of a lot of notable people. It's like they have this moment where he's in debt. So he leaves upstate New York. He flees with his wife and children, and he goes to a Mormon community in Burlington, Wisconsin. And we don't have to go deep into the history of the Mormon church here, but I think it's important to point out it has roots in the Great Lakes region. And then it's only the kind of second generation of Mormonism that then decamps out west, where we tend to think of the center now. And he's sort of right in that moment where the first leader, Joseph Smith, is still around, and he becomes a follower, pretty quickly. After Smith is killed, kind of just like steps into the vacuum and says, guess what, guys? Guess who's the next chosen one?
I'm the heir apparent.
Right here.
I've been in this church for a year. Yeah, why not me?
Yeah.
And people are like, who are you again? Yeah. But the funny thing is that even though, Smith dies, and there is this sort of tug of war over who is going to lead the people. And Brigham Young eventually, wins out and takes the flock to Utah and establishes his church there. But for a handful of hardcore believers, Strang is able to convince a significant amount of people to follow him and set up shop in Beaver Island.
Yeah. So what is his argument? I mean, I'm fascinated by the kind of way he mounts the case. So first off, I mean, look, a lot of religions are this way, but Mormonism as a sort of religion that is relatively new to us, we have a real sense of kind of how it was originated. And it was a lot of like Joseph Smith showing up and saying like, hey, I have some documents. Hey, I have some papers. Like, hey, I had this vision and I wrote it down and, here's the proof. And Strang kind of picks up a lot of those same tactics, I would say, right? So he presents a letter that is probably a forgery, but he basically says like, hey, here's a letter that Smith wrote me saying I should be the successor. And then he also claims that an angel guided him to a set of brass plates, which was the exact same story that Smith had talked about in terms of receiving these visions. And part of me is just like, get your own backstory, like
where are these
brass
plates?
You're stealing the exact same thing. Yeah, I guess it worked for him, and so I'm going to pick it up. He talks about how an angel came to him in a dream, which is something Smith talked about a lot, and said that there's a land amidst wide waters and covered with large timber, and that is where he kind of gets his eyes on this area that has Beaver Island there. But Kellie, something you said about how Brigham Young takes a lot of the followers out west. There's part of the story to me that's kind of like the people who stick with Strang and splinter off. Maybe they just don't want to get in a covered wagon. Maybe they're just like, I'm gonna hang around.
Listen, it's not an easy journey. Going out west back then took a long, long time. You weren't exactly going through friendly territory, shall we say, on the way to get there. And it's interesting with Strang, too, because even Beaver Island is not uninhabited. I mean, there are people that live there as well that have a special claim to the place. And so
we should probably ding, ding, ding. That's the American story, too.
Yes, I know. But if you've got to pick your poison between, like, going out west and navigating the wilderness as opposed to sort of staying local, I suppose you might want to stay a little bit local.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's also worth noting that, Mormons were under an extermination order in Missouri at this time. They had been chased out of Illinois. And so there's a reason why there are a lot of Mormons who pack up their stuff and head out to Utah, hoping to get away from this level of persecution. But Strang, he keeps the remainders.
But there's a reason why then you would maybe choose an island too, right?
Oh,
as a place to set up your new splinter colony. And Beaver Island, it's the biggest island in Lake Michigan. I mean, it's not enormous, but there's, as you said, Kellie, some existing communities there. Native communities, Irish immigrants are also living there. Today, there's only about 600 year-round residents, but it's had a population for a long time. So we have this group of followers. Do we have a sense of, it's a few hundred, I would say, right? It's a little hard to get your hands on it, but a few hundred people are following Strang. They're known as the Strangites. I don't want to get too deep into the kind of like doctrine, how their doctrine is differed, but like, what is their lifestyle? What do they do once they kind of decide to set up this colony on Beaver Island?
Well, they set up a kind of, you said earlier, a theocratic society where the Mormons are in control. They rename it St. James. named after James Strang, and they build something called King's Highway to the interior of the island, which, should be buzzing people's heads a little bit just because we fought a war about kings. So it's a theocracy. It's got this kind of monarchical shape to it. People who are not Mormon still have to pay tithes to the church. And Strang himself enters politics. He is both a king and a state representative, which seems like a little bit of a
king and a congressman.
Yeah, state congressman.
Before we start, I want to recommend a beautiful season of The Heart from fellow Radiotopian Caitlin Prest, a legendary audio maker who is known for exploring big questions and creating cinematic love stories from a feminist perspective. Caitlin has just revisited her series No, which is a series that was produced on the eve of the Harvey Weinstein scandals, about a topic that was supposed to be treated differently forevermore. In the series, we follow the story of a young girl navigating love, sex, and consent, and all the men in her life that she tried to say no to. It wasn't produced that long ago, but even with just a few years of perspective, it's really interesting to revisit No, as Caitlin is doing with some new material in the Heart feed. This is a difficult topic, but it ends up being heartwarming, soul-crushing, and funny at the same time. So whether you listened to it when it first came out, or you are new to it now, listen to the No series with fresh ears. Check it out in the Heart, wherever you get your podcasts. I want to take a moment to tell you about Quince, your solution to stylish summer clothes. Now, I am recording this very spot on what I would say is the first true summer day here where I live. It is hot. It is sunny. I'm not going to lie. It's a little sticky even down here in my office. It is all those things, but it can still also be stylish. To me, peak summer is the time to go back to those reliable, high-quality staples in your wardrobe. Obviously, there's linen. And lucky for you, Quince has a ton of great linen clothing, from button-downs to pants to shorts. I have fully flipped the switch to linen, sometimes all linen. I am wearing my 100% European linen drawstring beach pants right now. They go great with sandals, but I can also dress them up a little bit if I want to throw on a button-down or even a light jacket. By the way, those linen pants, they're under $50. How does Quince do this? Well, it's by working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middleman. Quince gives you luxury without the markup. Give your summer closet an upgrade with Quince. Go to quince.com/thisday for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/thisday to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/thisday. Stay cool out there, folks. But, he did. I mean, I give him a little credit here that he realizes that you have to play some actual on-the-ground politics.
Yeah.
And he gets elected. Maybe some shenanigans in that election, but he gets elected and reelected in 1853 and 1855. He gets elected to the Michigan House of Representatives. Do we have a sense of his platform? What's he up to?
I mean, he's an abolitionist, so there's that. And I appreciate anybody that's anti-slavery. But yeah, he's petitioning to request that free Black people, particularly Black men, come to the island, that they be allowed to vote on the island as well. He denounces the infamous Fugitive Slave Act. So there's some elements, we should say, that are relatively progressive in the light of the times in which he was living. But he also is very much a polygamist and has lots of children by all of his wives, and is still sort of taking up a lot of the Mormon traditions and customs.
And he also uses his legislative power to consolidate Beaver Island as the county seat, and now all of a sudden there's some political power there, and he kind of ends up just sort of being able to protect his little fiefdom. As we get a few years into the early to mid 1850s, he kind of gets this reputation, and this might be a little overblown or starting to get into some real mythology here, but as a kind of pirate king of sorts. And the New York Times wrote an article just a little bit after this where it said, "The story of the horrors of Beaver Island probably never will be written, but enough has been learned to show that the reign of Strang was of the most heartless and treacherous nature." So what do we make of that? I mean, how much did he rule with an iron fist? How violent was this reign of his?
Man, I mean, I think that he probably did rule with an iron fist. It's a theocracy after all. And the 19th century was a pretty violent century.
Yeah.
But so many of these marauding stories and these stories of like bloodlust come out so much later. They're not really contemporaneous. Like that New York Times story was from 1907. So we're talking like 50 years later. And so it is probably, at the very least, very overblown. There probably was a little bit of marauding happening, right? Getting supplies from ships that wandered by. But actually, historians now think they might have just been salvaging ships that wrecked or capsized in Lake Michigan, that they might not have even been, trying to seize ships at all.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he was still ruling with an iron fist,
To be clear,
he's not a benevolent dictator, put it that way. If you are going to live on his island, you are going to pay taxes, you're going to have stiff penalties, and I imagine that you wouldn't have a whole lot of luxury at your disposal, that people were sort of living their best lives. I don't think that's happening. But I guess if you're going to rule, you got to do what you got to do. But
yes, there is an interesting, though. I mean, if you're running a little operation, you have to recruit. According to one historian, they were running ads that would basically say, like, come to Beaver Island, we'll give you 40 acres and $100 and join on up with our clan. And so, I'm sure a bunch of people took him up on that. And then maybe we're like, wait a minute, what have I gotten myself into? But look, he obviously was not a benevolent dictator, and I think he relied a little bit on corporal punishment sometimes, and this in the end is what came to lead to his downfall. He had flogged 2 people in 1856 for disobedience, and then those 2 men end up revolting and murdering him. They were acquitted in a 1-hour trial on a different island, funnily enough, but that is how Strang dies of his wounds, July 9th, 1856, and kind of pretty quickly, the island gets reclaimed by, other fishermen and other people living on other islands, and they kind of just like expel the Strangites, who at this point were about over 2,500, strong, not a small.
That's a sizable community.
Pretty sizable. But basically they get dispersed once their leader has been killed.
And there is this sense that there must have been unrest that isn't fully taken up in the historical record, because here you have these 2 men that kill him and then they're acquitted right away. Yeah. And then as soon as he's gone, you have a rebellion in which the dispossessed Irish immigrants come and take over the island again. So all of that suggests that it was not a happy theocracy, at least for the people who were not favored by it.
Yeah. Okay, a couple other tidbits, and these like really launch it into just like apocryphal American tale kind of territory. So first off, there's rumors of buried treasure, of course.
Yes.
Any pirate-related story has to have rumors of buried treasure. So there's a rumor that there's a chest of his ill-gotten gains buried somewhere on the island. No one has found it yet. I don't know how actively people are looking for it. But, if you're making the kind of like Stranger Things version of this show, that's the kind of thing at the heart of it, I would say.
What goes better hand in hand than treasures and islands?
Yes, exactly. The other thing that's interesting, and we've talked about this so many times, is, especially in this era, but like this is a story that kind of basically disappears from the history books, from common sort of understanding. And it doesn't get revived, as you said, Nikki, for, at least a generation or 2 later. And I just think whenever you have that, we've done this so many times on the show, we've talked about just kind of that vacuum, that gap, means that all these other sort of apocryphal tales are going to intercede. And I mean, even the sort of like historians who have devoted themselves to this are basically like, most of this could be BS. We really don't know.
There's some truth nuggets for sure, but which ones is a little hard to decipher.
Yeah.
And it's a great story of that kind of something between like a religious zealot and a classic American con man.
Yeah.
That makes the story resonate, and it's no wonder that it's been resurrected.
Yeah. Set on an island with some treasure. It's a great one. That's
a mob activity too.
Yeah. I mean, and it also, I think the fact that it is a religious story, and it's a story born of a time when there was a ton of sort of religious awakening and just new religions popping up throughout the United States. I mean, people were how do I put this? People were questioning reality, you know?
Yeah.
And so it is no surprise that then you have this story where it's hard to tell what was real, what wasn't, you know, it just sort of all fits.
Yeah.
I think we're due some new religions given those conditions.
I know. Listen,
No,
the 19th century was ripe with people claiming it into the world, claiming Christ's return, claiming all kinds of, doom and gloom that was being foreshadowed through religion. And it kind of makes sense when you think about the times in which people are living. It was really difficult times. Yeah. And so people needed to have a rationale or a reason for why things were playing out the way that they were.
Yeah. Well, there are still some Strangites around. It is a little hard to get your head around exactly how many, but it's somewhere between, a few dozen and maybe a few hundred. And no surprise, the Strangites themselves have splintered a few times as well. So depending on what you count and how you count and so forth, there's a group based in Independence, Missouri that has a website. There's a group based in Shreveport, Louisiana. You can go there, and both of them conduct missionary work now on the internet. So the island has become World Wide Web. And, if you want to join up with the Strangites in these troubled times, maybe it's time to rebuild that little colony. We'll see. Get your hands on that treasure.
That's right. Free Beaver Island.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we're really glad we did this. And thank you again to Tim for suggesting this. We love this. We get a lot of suggestions through our newsletter, in fact. And I will end by plugging the newsletter. A reminder that in our newsletter, we have this ongoing project getting ready for America's 250th birthday. 250 years of American history takes all kinds. There's, of course, the presidents and the wars and so forth, but also weirdo religious leaders setting up shop on remote islands are just as important to the history of this country and the 250-year story of how we got there as anything. We're going to spend the next year plus trying to capture it all. So, listeners, you've heard us say it before, but please subscribe to the newsletter where you will get a weekly America 250 watch, which is our look at how all of this is playing out. You'll also get a collection of interesting stories and analysis from U.S. history every week. It is also the best way to support our efforts. So there's a free version, but there are also various tiers at which you can support us. You can find it all at thisdaypod.com, thisdaypod.com, to become an America 250 semi-quincentennial backer of our project, thisdaypod.com. Thanks to everyone who has already signed up. All right, that'll do it for this week's episode. Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Live show on Beaver Island next year, okay?
That's right.
Radiotopia from PRX.